Secretariat of Selangor to give an opening speech.
Terima kasih saya ucapkan kepada Encik Ehsan. Selamat sejahtera. Good afternoon and good to all of you. I'm here in my capacity as the General Manager of Penalists Institute. Just in case you're wondering, I'd like to first of all thank all of you for coming today, for spending your Saturday afternoon with us, and especially for not getting RSBC confused with Royal Selangor Club. I guess those who are confused will be at the other club now, they won't be here. So welcome everyone. First of all, I'd like to say welcome and thank you to Dr. Heba, Ezzat, Raouf, for coming all the way from Istanbul to grace us with her presence here, to not only share talks with us here today on a very important topic in terms of Islam's role in the public sphere, but from what I understand, she's also had the opportunity and will have opportunities to speak to other groups as well here in Malaysia, not just in KL, but in other parts of Malaysia as well. And I think it's really good for us to have such a distinguished speaker come and speak and address us. I'm sure Ehsan will give a much more thorough introduction in his introduction to the speakers later. But I just want to say that I am a bit jealous of you, Dr. Heba, because you have, the last I checked, 744,000 Twitter followers and 714,000 Facebook likes. So you can see Dr. Heba is a very influential person, and whatever she says goes out there to I think millions of people, indirectly and also directly. Of course, I'd like to thank Dato'Dr. Ahmad Farouk Musa as well, an old friend. Thank you very much for your efforts in trying to broaden the Islamic discourse here in Malaysia, and I think that Penang Institute has had a long working relationship with IRF, and it is a relationship and a partnership that we hope that we can continue for a long time to come. With Dr. Ahmad Farouk's efforts, we have brought in many speakers, both local as well as foreign, to address important issues in the Islamic discourse. I'd also like to welcome and thank Dr. Maszlee Malik. I'm sure he's no stranger to all of us, but you may not know, and I would like to use this opportunity to congratulate Dr. Maszlee for his publication of his new book, Islamic Governance in the Southeast Asian Perspective. My only complaint, Dr. Maszlee, is because it's published by Routledge, so the price is a little bit prohibitive for I think many students, let's say. Even the ebook version I think is not so cheap, but I'm sure if I have a chance to read it in the near future, I'm sure it will be a very, very good reference book, and I think those of us who are interested in taking Islamic governance, understanding it at a deeper level, would definitely want to check Dr. Maszlee's book out. Maybe you cannot buy it directly, you can go to a library in a nearby university or the university that you're studying at. And of course, Dr. Dzulkefly Ahmad is not here yet. He's someone that I think has tried to really push the Islamic discourse in the larger audience, in the larger sort of like public square in Malaysia. My only regret is that I was not able to share stage with him in Parliament. He was elected from 2008 to 2013, whereas I was elected only after 2013. Unfortunately, he lost his seat of Kuala Selangor in 2013. But he's working hard now. From what I know, he's coming from Kuala Selangor as we speak, so I think that's why he's a bit late. But I hope that God willing, if the stars align and if the opportunity beckons, then perhaps both he and I can share a similar platform in the Parliament after the next general elections, which I'm sure many of you are waiting and anticipating greatly for. So I think without saying too much, I'd also like to thank our moderator, Ehsan. I really value the work we are doing in Project Dialogue. I think it's a very important initiative to reach out to the younger generation, especially those whose main medium of communication is in Malay. And I'd also like to thank you for your work in BFM Kupas and BFM Bentara. Those of us who listen to it, would definitely value what Project Dialogue is doing on different mediums. So thank you very much, Ehsan. With that, I'd just like to wish you a productive discussion and fruitful discussion, and I hope that the Q&A session after the presentation will be an engaging one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, YB Yong Shanmin, for the introduction, even the introduction of myself, the description of my works in Project Dialogue and BFM. It's more 3 or 4 years back. At the moment, I'm more actively for today, and for now, it's more that I have now. Start then some other organizations. But another point which BFM in this name and also a hotel of Serdang.
Oh, mana? Duduk kat mana?
That should be also, there should be some thanks, maybe. Alright, okay, never mind. I think it's time for us to proceed to our main discussion for today. We want to discuss about civil state. Is civil state Islam? There's 2 main terms which we would like to explain and which we would like to understand further. Civil states and the concept of Islam, the Islamic state. When we talk about Islam and the concept of state, we usually understand, we usually associate the concept of state in Islam to laws, as an example, Sharia law. Sometimes we see as more punitive laws compared to other types of laws. And besides that, rulings by rulers, Khalifa, usually is seen as only Muslim and rule society. And besides that, is also the role of the ulama, as those who have the authority to set the direction and how the state can be run. And this has been the case for generations, for years, of how the state is to be seen as Islamic is being understood by people. However, when we look back in the past, maybe in the past 50 years, maybe more for that, 100 years, Islamic societies, we are in some ways having some kind of difficulties in having a good society that's really a common of the state. Popular ideas of the state, including democracy, equality, sustainable development, in fact, it's not usually seen as the best practice in Muslim societies, in Muslim countries. Why is that the case? And particularly when we talk about the civil state, can we, as Muslims in particular, say that Muslim countries are actually civil at the time? We are facing a lot of difficulties, economic inequality, problems related to poverty, and our environment record is not so good as well. So now it's time for us to reflect more on how do we want to understand, how we should come up with a state which could also be Islamic, but at the same time must be civil. So I would like to introduce the speakers for our discussion today. I will start with, of course, our guest distinguished speaker, Dr. Heba Raouf. She graduated from Cairo University and taught at the Political Science Department, 3 courses of political theory and history of political thought for almost 30 years. She also was an affiliate professor at American University in Cairo, 2006 to 2013, where she taught courses on political Islam, political theory of thought, and political thought in theory. She was a visiting researcher, then a visiting fellow in many distinguished academic institutions, including University of Westminster, Oxford Center of Islamic Studies, Georgetown University, University of Maastricht, and University of California, Berkeley, London School of Economics. There's quite a number of institutions. She published widely on classic and contemporary Islamic thought, issues of globalization, women in Islam, and urban politics. She has also been active in the public sphere in Egypt. She was a coordinator of many youth initiatives and is a public speaker and communicator. She is also a translator and lawyer. The latest publications include 2 books in Arabic, Towards a New Civility and the Political Imagination of Islamists. The translation of Ziauddin Sadrar's book on Mecca into Arabic is due to appear in bookstores September 2017. Currently, she resides in Istanbul. Our speaker is Dr. Dzulkefly Ahmad, briefly introduced by me before. He is the Director of Parti Amanah Utara, Amanah, an Islamist Democrat and former MP of Selangor. He was a trained psychologist from the Imperial College UK. He has also authored Thriving for Change, the Blind Spot series, and Ajib Nomics, Rahmat atau Malapetaka. Not serious. Dr. Dzulkefly was a former director of PAS Research Center and a executive member of PAS. He is a prominent Islamist leader that promotes Islamist Democrat agenda in Next speaker will be Dr. Maszlee Malik, Assistant Professor in the Faculty of Islamic Radio Knowledge and Human Sciences at the International Islamic University in Malaysia in Kuala Lumpur. He obtained his PhD in the UK in Political Science. Dr. Maszlee also taught at Raouf University from 2008 to 2009. He was invited to be guest speaker for SOAS, Summer School on Political Islam, for 2 consecutive years, 2009 and 2010. Furthermore, Dr. Maszlee Malik is also frequently invited as a guest speaker by many Malaysian media outlets to talk on the issues relating to political Islam, Middle Eastern politics, and harassment. His research area is in Islamic jurisprudence and also contemporary Islamic political thought and movements and good governance. He has also authored Good Governance, Civil Society in Islam, Foundations of Islamic Governance in Southeast Asian Perspective in 2016, and Generasi Kedua Politik Islam, Wacana Baru Gerakan Islam, also in 2016. And of course, last but not least, Dato'Dr. Farouk Musa is the Chairman and Director of the Islamic Penalists Fund, an intellectual movement and a think tank promoting reform and renewal of Islam, democracy, good governance, and human rights. He is actively involved in civil society and emerging discourse on both Islamism. He is also involved in interfaith dialogue, especially with regard to Christian-Muslim relations and intra-faith dialogue, especially in terms of Shia and Sunni discourse. He has presented papers at numerous international meetings, including the latest at Symposium on Islam and Contemporary Issues in Tehran in March 2017. Professionally, he is an academic at the School of Medicine, Monash University in Malaysia, and also a cardiothoracic service. He is currently Commissioner at the Commonwealth Initiative for Freedom of Religion, based in Westminster, London, and also Director at the Centre for Preventing Corruption and Coordinating Reform. He was a former Deputy Chairperson of the City of Europe, responsible for the free fair election. That's a long background of all our speakers, to make sure that we are having all the very distinguished speakers. And for sure, it's time for us to start discussion with the talk by our guest speaker, Dr. Raouf.
Thank you very much for coming on the weekend, and sorry for starting a bit late. I usually talk about things that I am currently reflecting on, and I come usually with a lot of ambiguities in my head and reflections that are not full yet, because there is always that endeavor of making our own ijtihad in life genuine. So when I was asked to talk about is the civil state Islamic, it reminded me of the many debates we had that led us actually to nowhere, and this is why we are not witnessing our renaissance till now, because we usually frame our thinking according to questions that have been posed to us, not that emerged from our own concerns and our own illusion. The question is legitimate, the title is legitimate, but it is not posed by us. So usually when you say, is a civil state Islamic, it is the second half of the question of, is an Islamic state civil? And then, is an Islamic state modern? And it is Islamic State democratic. And it's not Western Enlightenment ideas of a civil religion, you know, can it match such a notion of giving people freedom, basing politics on the contractual dimension, building a new society that is based on individualism? And then is Islam democratic? Would it allow those who do not believe in Islam to have their own say? Would it allow Muslims who want to change their faith to have the freedom of doing so? Would it allow probably women issues, minorities, and you name it? Okay? But I think that we need to look again at the question that we are asking, especially that being a political scientist, I have been engaged for so many years in debates in my specialty, in my field of study, and I've been engaged in debates across the globe on issues of deconstructing modernity, the malaises of modernity, how the Enlightenment project actually was betrayed by the modern project, how we are witnessing, especially in the works of the not only postmodernists but also the critics of modernity that do not need necessarily to be postmodern, how we are witnessing liquid modernity, the emergence of liquid modernity, capitalism in its late forms and late stages, different ideas about the malaises of also democracy itself and how democracy is actually a capitalist hegemonic tool of manipulating the masses, you name it, from the French schools of critique of modernity and democracy to the modern sort of rise of more leftist, radical, democratic visions, the notions of deliberative democracy as a critique of representative democracy, many things that we are studying and we are teaching at the moment. And then you are invited to venues where people are asking you, is Islam democratic? And then, well, I just left a venue where democracy has been, you know, bombed by all the different arguments and how it is actually a deception of the people. And this does not mean we want an authoritarian regime, but we want a different democracy maybe. Maybe we need to focus more on the different dimensions of democracy that have been neglected, talking about the culture of democracy and the public sphere. You name all the thinkers that have been talking about that for 30 years. They communicated actually in the public sphere as well, Habermas and others. So I felt somehow that I'm going to have schizophrenia. Seriously, I mean, we just ended a seminar on all these interesting ideas that are very stimulating, and then you face a question saying, is Islam democratic? Oh my God, what should I say now? If I say no, they would say, oh yeah, so you're a nicest person. You know, all moderates end up being fundamentalists, you know, but we don't trust you anymore. So this is the dilemma. When we ask, is an Islamic state, is a civil state Islamic? The right question would be actually, what is civil state? And this has been a question that was raised in the Egyptian public sphere after 2011, after we had the uprising or the revolution or whatever you name it, the change, the aspiration for change in our society. And my answer has been all the time, there is no such thing as a civil state in the first place. No state is civil. No state, no modern state is civil. Modern state is about sovereignty, authority, domination, hegemony, whether you take it from the theory of nationalism or you take it from the critique of Marxism. You know, no state is civil. A state means a sovereign monopoly of power and the freedom to exercise the state of exception, according to Carl Schmitt and others, as we keep saying, where actually the state can overnight claim that there is danger that is threatening the nation, and then laws can be suspended and human rights can be violated. The state is a machine of war. The state is a machine of fragmentation of the community. The state is a machine of exercising the power of those who are in the seats of power. So, and democracy, on the other hand, if we relate democracy to civil ruling or civil rule or civil government, democracy, on the other hand, has been claimed to be a way to reach consensus for many, many decades. This was the definition. And now the definition is democracy is just a tool to manage differences and opposite interests. So it does not aim to reach consensus, it's just a mechanism of recognizing that we will not reach consensus, but how are we going to manage our differences and the opposing interests of different parts of the society, of different groups, of different segments of different classes. So to give some credit to the Marxist analysis after it had been completely beaten out of the realm of discussion in many Islamic societies. So, and my claim and my argument was always, there is no civil state. But if you mean by civil state civility vis-a-vis violence or vis-a-vis a religious authoritarian rule a la Middle Ages, or you mean a society that is based on compassion, respect of the other, tolerance, etc., then we are not talking about a civil government, state in terms of government and power, the state, l'État, but we're talking about the state as condition. So the right question would be, what is a civil condition that would lead to fair politics, that would lead to respect of human rights? And what sort of political arrangements are we looking for to preserve this civil condition? L'état civil, where the word comes from, originally from the understanding of Rousseau, because he invented this civil state. He didn't mean state in terms of political government. He meant state condition. L'état civil de société. This is the condition of the society, and based on that condition of society, the arrangements of relations of power can be imagined, and the spaces of law, and where law cannot help us reach a better society, where morality comes in, where ethics comes in, where the understanding of nobility comes in, and how we define, opposing Rousseau on this part, how do we define the savage? What is savage? I mean, are we modern? Are we enlightened? Are our modern states civilized? The test would be, as you test human beings in their relations and their moral integrity, when they are not in good terms with each other. So we say that the honor of disagreement, that when you disagree with someone, you stick to morality. You don't just push your ethics aside and say, now this is a big fight with the man and I have no moral constraints anymore. The same for politics. If you want to test whether a state is civil, as we assume, you see it in times of war. Is the American model of a modern state that claims to be liberal, civil when it comes to the war in Iraq or Syria? I mean, this army that claims to be defending democracy and spreading democracy hired mercenaries, black voters, and actually managed legally on the international level not to hold his soldiers accountable for war crimes, and refuses to be accountable to the International Criminal Court. Very interesting. And then they spread democracy and they ask us, is Islam civil? Is Islam democratic? Can you actually cope with modernity? What if I don't want to cope with your modernity? What is savagery? And what does it mean to be civilized? These are the questions that I have actually been working on for almost 20 years. Interestingly enough, what led me to ask these questions are wishes of women in general. Because I was faced by the feminist discourse that again was asking, is Islam feminist enough? Is it good enough for gender equality? And my question was, what are you aiming for? What do you want? What is the ultimate goal that you want to reach? And what are the civil conditions of the example of Islam in regards to women's rights? How women are seen? And this brings you to the very basic questions. The questions of politics, and this is also another issue, that politics has been defined across my academic career as a political scientist so many times. We started by the Bible, You study politics, theory of the state. This is the starting point. And everything else comes later. Theory of the state, whether you are studying political theory, political thought, history of political thought, or you're studying IR, international relations theory. The state is the core of the political thinking, which is deception. The human being is the core of political thinking historically. But as much as modernity was against faith and the absolute, as much it ended up also being against philosophy and the absolute thinking of essential values. Hence we entered the age of postmodernism to say there is nothing essential. Don't take me back to something that you say human nature. There is no human nature. There is a human being that is changing all the time, not alone in terms of sexuality and transgender. This is another issue, and this is the most simple one to deal with. Actually, in terms of what is a human being in relation to animals, in relation to nature, and in relation to the machine. What is different from a human being, between a human being and a machine? And for those who are more aware of what happens now, the nightmares or the jokes that we had in novels like A Brave New World or 1984 or these novels is becoming reality now. I mean, we used to read them at school and say, oh, this is just interesting imagination, and establish some discussions around them to take them as a metaphor. It's not a metaphor anymore, it's reality. Lately, two robots have been stopped and the system two robots have developed a specific language. Those who are interested in artificial intelligence know this case. It happened a few weeks ago that two robots in a big project actually developed a language between themselves. And the project had to stop these two robots. So now we are witnessing really the nightmares. It's like, where do we go from here? And then what does it mean to be human? If actually everything you do is via, there is a medium between you, there is an adapter of technology between you and nature, and sometimes between you and yourself. And I keep looking into the phenomena of the selfies, and it amazes me, seriously. It's not only about taking a selfie because there is no one around to take the picture for us. It's about seeing yourself via the machine, seeing yourself via the eye of others, and seeing yourself through this visual sort of transformation of your own face. And this is very much related to politics, because the very micro is actually also extended to the very macro. How many ideological frames of reference have been also taking selfies, showing the best of themselves in front of others, while actually this is not their truth. And that the photoshops that have been used to decorate savagery have been so many, the filters, So eventually we see an image of systems and we see an image of ideological frames of reference that are not genuine, that are not true. So back to our question. If we say we will not have politics of justice, politics of fairness, unless we have a civil condition. The civil state meaning a civil condition, and then politics would be arranged accordingly. What is the civility or the civil condition we are aspiring from an Islamic perspective? To answer the question, is Islam civil, is Islam democratic, is Islam respective of human rights, etc. So, I think that, as I just mentioned, we have to deconstruct the claims of the civility of the modern state, and then ask important questions about the civil and the urban. And this is going to be basically the line of my argument in my presentation, that you will not be understanding anything related to modernity and civility, or an optional perspective of how we can build a more fair society, more respective of our humanity, unless we think in terms of space and place. A bit of a Heideggerian sort of approach to the self, time, and place and space. Because most of our arguments have been theoretical. And then when you walk out of the room, you are facing a modern city. And you are facing a city that, if it was not for the two towers, I wouldn't have recognized that this is Kuala. If you throw me from my airplane and say, where are you? And I see no faces, and I see no two towers, I would say, Singapore? I would say, if I don't mind the greenery everywhere, if you take away the green color, I might say one of the Gulf states, one of the Gulf countries. Skyscrapers, if you take away the people, if you take away the nature, if you
take away the human and the natural, everything looks alike. Malls look alike, clothes look alike, buildings look alike, machines look alike. If you make people transparent and look at the things they are wearing only as if they are moving without a body, without a face, the brands are the same, the colors are the same, the fashion is the same. Even if you delete the faces and look at the hair, the haircuts look very much similar. Women's hair color looks very much similar. So it's very interesting. What civility are we talking about? So that we can talk about politics starting from here, from a more of a Platonic perspective. When Plato wrote the Republic, he started with the question of justice. And he, interestingly enough, and this is overlooked by many scholars and by many students of political science, he started with the question of death. The question of justice started with questioning life and thinking about death, and hence in the debates, in the dialogue in Plato's Republic, the person who started thinking about justice was an old man that Socrates eventually, in Plato's Republic, met, and he was saying, well, I'm thinking these days about that my life is ending. I did so many injustices to people, and I'm trying to give back the rights to those whom I am indebted to, because if there is a day of judgment, interesting in Plato's Republic, you know, if we have a different life later, then I'm not on the safe side. So now I'm thinking about trying to fix what I spoiled so far. And then the question of justice came in, and then the question of citizenship, and then the question of education, and then the question of politics, and then so this is how we think about politics. This is how we should be thinking about politics. When we take the Islamic example again, what was the wisdom of turning Yathrib? This was the name of the city the Prophet immigrated to. Why was it called? When Prophet Muhammad settled down, established the contract, had a constitution, and sat with the different tribes, and sat with the Jews and the non-Muslims, and wrote the agreement to manage this. Why did they call it the city? Al-Madinah. Why didn't this say that? Why didn't people become nationalistic and say, never change the name of our city, this is Yathrib forever? Why was it turned into Al-Madinah? Because here you have a political community, and you have a civil state that led to a constitution that led to a political example. And this is how we should think about matters, about that. Communities decide the type of politics that they represent. If these communities are materialistic, if they are evil, if they agree on hurting other people and in them enjoying peace, this was the claim of modernity, that we will achieve peace. Yes, peace on your continent, in Europe, in the States, but not peace in mind. Because when you promised peace, you started colonializing our own countries. And till today, we have neo-colonialism. So what type of peace are we talking about? Yes, you fulfilled your promise to your people, not to us. And then you claimed it's universalistic, and then you started the colonial journey. So the city is very important. We will not understand politics in day-to-day life and see and decode the manifestations of our political and our social and our philosophical thinking unless we simply look around. Look around you and ask yourself questions about civility, about democracy, about fairness, about justice, about freedom, and about all the questions that are asked in politics. The city is either, according to Mumford, who is a very prominent urban sociologist, is the cradle of civility, truly, the city. And interestingly enough, Mumford was complaining decades ago about the fact that our cities today are actually eating up civility. The city that was established or to protect civility is actually not achieving that. It is fragmenting the society, it is focusing on the individual dimension of individual interest, and it's filled with conflict. How we manage the city is actually very important to understand how the wider spaces are managed politically. Who has access to where? And starting with the land would tell you who owns the city and who owns the state. How people have access to land. And interestingly enough, in our fiqh in Islam, we talk about our understanding of politics and our original understanding of our role there is the notion of ihya. Ihya means revival. Any person who revives a deserted land has the right to have the land. The land is not capital in terms of capitalist capital. Okay? And this was the starting point of the nation state and the territorial state and the cartographic mentality. In Egypt today, in my country where I can give examples from, the state owns the land and the army owns the state. Running the state. Okay? So every morning, the president, who is originally a general, this is not a secret, this is not a fact, this is not criticism, this is a fact, I'm saying facts, okay? Every day, he distributes or he assigns more land to the army, okay? About a year ago, I think, there was a law, there was a decree by the president, we call it a Republican decree, okay? So, that the army would put its hand on 2 kilometers, right and left, all the highways in Egypt. And of course, if you ask why, they will say national security. And you say, can I have more explanation? No. National security is not open to anyone. I'm not anyone, I'm a citizen. I'm a citizen, okay? And I'm giving an example of my country because I know the country, but I know that this is the modern state everywhere. So on one hand, not to be too harsh on one country, because you have to understand the paradigm. It's not about names or people or those who are in power. It's about the system that is functioning of the modern state. This is how it works. The land that is supposed to be owned by the nation, there is no nation. The nation is represented by the voices of those who are in power. And those who are the most powerful in power are those who have arms. It's as simple as that. I mean, I'm not saying anything that is new. It's just that you have to put the facts in order. Instead of putting this fact at the end, put it at the front. You know, this is how things work. And this is how, if we look at least to the Middle East politics that I know more than East Asia, you know, this has been the case all the time. So the city tells you a bit about politics and the relations of power. The city tells you about economics, about capital, about flows of capital, about globalized neoliberalism. It's interesting, and that by law, instead of protecting the land of the nation, actually more and more countries are making more and more laws to allow others to take the land of the people while depriving the people of the land and sometimes even displacing them. You know, you come and you say, okay, Kuala Lumpur, put it on the map. This is what Lefebvre calls the ideology of urban planning. Okay, put it on the map. Where are the best locations? Okay, we want that land and we will put it for investment, for foreign investment, to get foreign currency. Okay, oh, oops, there is a tribe living there. Oh, there are poor people. These used to be the outskirts of the city, but when the city grew, these are locations that are very central now. Okay, those people need to get out. You come to me and say, sorry, you have to evacuate your home. Oh, seriously? Why? Oh, because of the planning. We have a new planning of the city to modernize. Okay, what about my right to the land? We will compensate you. But if I don't want to be compensated, I actually don't have a choice. Ideology of urban planning. This is the most important ideology today in the world. Not Marxism, not even Islamism, not democracy, not liberalism. Urban planning is the new religion. And you have to adhere and say amen. Because if you stand against it, you're standing against more income for the country. Okay, what about more income for the country and respect of my rights? We have now, again, in the case of Egypt, a case of an island in the Nile that is called Warraq. This island in the Nile is now subject to, I think, 160,000, estimated 160. You can never tell the numbers because of informal housing, which is human housing. Informal means that the government did not formally, officially provide people with housing, so they started building their own houses. Very simple, you know, but this is a crime because you are using the land that is owned by the state as a human being because you simply need a roof. And this is illegal. And here comes the question of what is legal and what is moral. Sometimes the law is immoral. And sometimes the law is immoral and against religion. So where are the ulama here? Why don't they speak about the land as much as they speak about the body of women? These are spaces, and these are spaces. Why do they focus on the tiny space of the body of women, and they don't focus on the spaces of land taken from the poor and given to God knows who? Because you can give it to a Malaysian or an Egyptian or a Libyan or a Moroccan, you know, whatever you name it, businessman, and tomorrow it's owned by someone else. Because laws allow now people to own across borders. So, and you are asking me about the civil state? Is Islam prone to establish a civil state? Actually, yes. A civil state in terms of civil condition. And if you read the fiqh that has been attacked saying, oh, this is a heritage, in that heritage of 15th century of Islam, you will find amazingly huge numbers of fiqhi opinions and fatwas that actually give right of land to the people and give right of neighborhood, the al-shuf'a, al-irtifa, whatever. You just read the fiqh, because we have been reading only the fiqh in the personal issues, focus on the body, interestingly, in a transcendental faith, you know? But you don't focus on the rights of people and how they are created on this earth, actually to make i'mar, to sort of improve the condition of this planet. But eventually, it's now subject to fighting and wars. So this is an issue. Look at the city. The city is also, as David Harvey said, a machine of fragmentation all the time, with rising individualism and with the proximity of the bodies and the distance between the ideas and the thoughts and the feelings. We live next to each other like this, but we don't know anything. I once happened to live in a big building in Cairo, where the building was 15 floors, and each floor had 15 apartments, long corridor, okay? And it's impossible to apply the moral, ethical condition of haqq al-gar, the right of the neighbor. I mean, how can I say hello, good morning, and ask about the condition of my neighbor if I have in one floor 15 neighbors? And I was thinking at the time about issues of morality on another level, and then I once was in the elevator, and then I just started thinking, this building is un-Islamic. Can buildings be un-Islamic? Yes, sure, I can assure you, buildings can be un-Islamic. And they can be against humanity and compassion, because the space does not allow me to be compassionate. I wish I could ask about my neighbors, but there are so many. And hence, those who designed the building did not bother about the relation between the people who live in the building. They bothered more about using the piece of land as much as they could to squeeze it to get money. So instead of building 7 flats or 2 buildings or 3 buildings, not just 1 building and 1 big corridor, and the hell with all the values that people believe in. So yes, cities can be un-Islamic, and yes, buildings can be un-Islamic, and yes, streets can be un-Islamic, and yes, everything that is around us, if it is an obstacle between us and ourselves, an obstacle between us and nature, is un-Islamic. And it will only, to go back to the political question, produce relations of power that are hegemonic. And you can test it on the very small level. Who then runs the building of that 15 by 15? The most rich person will say, if we want to have a committee, Haji Fulan is a businessman and he has some time, he has some time and some money as well, to have the luxury of looking after the building while I work twice a day. I work in 2 different jobs, I teach in 2 different universities, so I really don't have the time. So this man would take care of it. And then one day you go back to the building, and in the reception you find that he put ceramic that we put in the bathrooms in the reception. This is his taste. you know, and he said, now I cleaned it for you. But it looks so ugly, and beauty is very important. Beauty and happiness were the core of political thinking across history. And Emma was talking to me today about her trip to Iran, and she said she was amazed by beauty. And she showed me pictures of Asfahan. But what is more important, and what she noticed, she said, the people who created these beautiful cities must have had such a mood of peace and tranquility. Because this is just a product of the people who built that civilization. Tourists go, take pictures, take selfies, and leave. And oh, it was beautiful. But there is a story behind that beauty. A story of a civil state. A story of a civil condition. A story of an understanding of life. A story of a community. A story of artists who thought that this is their own jihad. Not to make life ugly, but to make life beautiful. And this is a political doctrine as well. It's not only about, advocating or preaching beauty. No, it's also preaching justice. Because in such a society where beauty is so important, I don't think that the ugly acts of injustice would be tolerated. And you will definitely, if you dig into these cities, you will find that they have a very strong customary sort of law based on justice and fairness, that there was a notion of compassion, a notion of ithar, giving away to those who need, a notion of fighting poverty in a way, because there is no way that someone can build such a beautiful building while people are around sort of completely without rights. It's hard to imagine. And we have to look into that in fiqh and in history as well. One of the most important books that were published lately is a book by Armando Salvatore titled Sociology of Islam. And I mentioned that in the lecture yesterday, that he said most of our analysis in political science and social sciences and Islamic studies, when we study Islamic history, is that we focus on knowledge and power. So we study the structure of the state, the structure of the different kingdoms, dynasties, we study wars, we study ghazawat, we study the frames of institutions, governance, good governance, as it is called today. But we don't actually see how the society moved within history. We don't see the models and the formations of civility in day-to-day life. Civility here, we do not mean etiquette, being nice and good and caring. But civility means the model of social interaction. The way people looked at each other and respected each other, and also the right to spaces of the city, but also spaces of privacy as well. I mean, enjoying privacy is something very important for any civilized community. As much as we have common space, we have public sphere, we have a deliberative way of discussing our matters and deciding for our own destiny, but we also have respect for private spaces. And this distinction between the private, the individual, and the public is very important. That is very much established also in the Islamic life. City and civility has been defined also back to Rousseau and savagery, according to the Enlightenment, but also has been defined lately in political science and social sciences since the early 20th century, especially in anthropology, as vis-a-vis the tribe, vis-a-vis what is not urban. So you don't expect to find civility outside the urban space. So civility means city. People move to the city to become civilized. Okay? This is a myth. Especially if you know, of course, in any society there are injustices. Tribes can be a nightmare. Of course, this sort of imposition of specific culture, etc. But those who see the nightmare should also see the solidarity networks. Should also know, and this is a question that Diane Singerman, a very good friend from the Washington University, did her PhD on. She said, lower middle class people in Cairo have so little income. Yet, they manage, because she lived with one of those families, to prepare their daughters for marriage by saving money and sort of preparing nice furniture for her, being able to buy all the things that she needs to establish her tiny small flat. So, and it's much nicer than theirs. They save for her to have the nice future, and their house is very modest. And she said, where do they get the money from? According to the economic calculations, of inflation and income, there is no way those people can survive, let alone save money. And she asked the question, and then she found out the power networks. Not the power in terms of the pyramid, the power in terms of the circle. Okay? Because we think in power in terms of the pyramid, not Egyptian generally. In power you have the elite, the state, and then you have the people, the masses. And in between civil society, that can be bound by one law. November 2016, we had a law of civil society in Egypt that actually lamed completely the civil society. You can read about it. Any initiative in civil society, if it's not approved by security, is considered a crime and you can face 5 to 15 years. You cannot, it's not only about money, it's not about collecting money illegally, it's about doing anything in the public sphere without permission. So this compassion, spontaneity initiative are banned. It's just, the state does not want anything except the individual. So, and this is everywhere. This is the nation state. This is the modern nation state. So, interestingly enough, also to contribute to the deconstruction of myths upon which our social sciences have been built, religion will fade away, the tribe will fade away. Okay? And people will become modernized, and they will choose to be so. They don't want to have the affiliations of a big community, they want to be individual and to have the right of self-fulfillment. And then we would have a civil state who is their argument. Okay? Interestingly enough, for the past 10 years, the amount of books about the return of the tribal affiliations and networks is amazing. Starting from what looks like a tribe, and it's very clever to realize, oh, this looks like a tribe, the diasporic networks. And the use of modern technology to link people who immigrated to other countries. And one of the biggest names about diasporic networks as a writer and scholar is Saskia Sassen. She's a very famous sociologist, and she spotted the sociology of global international relations. And she said those people who move from one country to the other, the Pakistanis and Bengalis and Indians in London, or the Turks in Germany, or how do they relate to their culture? How come they still survive and they go to mosques, or the Indians go to their places of worship, and generation after generation? How come they did not melt into the melting pots of modern society? And she found out that either they kept the culture, and with technology and social media, they started diasporic networks. And then I lived amongst the Pakistani community in Britain when I was there, not amongst the Arabs. I lived with the Pakistanis and Bengalis. And it was amazing that girls who actually graduated from SOAS and LSE were forced to go back and marry their cousins in the village in Pakistan. And I was surprised. And they bring them, and this guy is not educated. He just finished high school. And I would look at my friend and say, why did you accept that? And she said, I don't have an option. I mean, her father considers that if he gives his daughter away to whatever choices she makes, even if she marries a Muslim, but who is not Pakistani or Bengali or Indian or whatever, then his community back home would look at him as, oh, you became modernized and westernized. And so they themselves don't do that anymore back home, while he's doing it. And this is what was called in sociology the third place. You imagine a space as an immigrant where you hold to the traditions that in the real societies have developed and changed, but you sort of want to hold to them and turn them into stone, because this is the wall that is protecting you from seeing yourself as having changed the tradition of the ancestors. And while your own society back home changed, you didn't, and you become much more conservative than your own cousins back home. And there are so many things that come into that as well. So these diasporic networks look very much also tribal. Plus the return of the tribe, of course, when the state collapses, in the case, for those who are following, of Iraq and Syria. The tribe did not disappear. And when the states collapsed, the tribe emerged again. Not only emerged as a tool of political negotiation, which it is, but also a tool of solidarity, providing people of necessities, protecting them, and there is a return of the tribe. And actually the tribe never disappeared in Africa, and never disappeared in Asia. And to a great extent, not even in Latin America. So you read something and you walk around and see something else. That's why I tell my students all the time, when you are asked theoretical questions, take a minute, take a breath, and look around you. Because you are not supposed to answer questions that are based on myths. you should become much more, not transcendental only, but also more pragmatic. You know, look to reality around you, look to the city, look to the world, look to news, and try to make sense of this world around you. So when someone asks you about, is your faith democratic, is your faith civil, is your faith prone to be modernized, you should know more about asking the right questions and turning the question upside down and asking essential questions about humanity, about compassion, about civility, about faith, about the transcendental, about ethical thinking, about politics, about globalization, and the crimes done not only in wars but structurally. The structures of modernity and the structures of globalization in day-to-day life undermine your humanity. It does not mean that we need to go back to some history. Because as we discussed yesterday in our meeting, we were discussing yesterday in the group the book of The Impossible State by Heba, and he was misinterpreted of trying to deconstruct modernity. Oh, you want us to go back to the desert, to go back to the early history of Islam. No. The early history of Islam is important to look into, to see the foundations of building a moral society, as much as every student in any Western university has to study the Republic of Plato. It's a compulsory reading for social science and philosophy and the political science. And you can't do without it. You can't say, what are we reading this? This is Torah, this is Salafism of Western philosophy. Why should we go as Salafi as Plato and Aristotle? Don't think this way. Because we're not looking for going back to history, we're trying to capture the argument. What are the arguments that they were talking about? And in human life, in intellectual life, across history, the questions were always the same. How can we live a good life? Who are we? Identity. How can we live together? Society, human nature, and the cosmos. The question of the cosmos, of course, declined because we don't see the cosmos anymore. We are surrounded by buildings, so we don't see the sky. You know, the flat I live in now, I was always asked, why do you live there? Because it's not very close to the university where I teach, and I say, because I see the sky. It's very important for me to see the sky. In the morning, I wake up, I open the window, I see the sky. In other places I live, I open the window, I don't see anything. You know, and this also affects the way we think. Because the horizons of significance and the horizons of meaning are affected by your level of understanding that there is a horizon in the first place that is far away and should strive to go and look for. So questions of politics cannot be separated from questions of human nature, type of society, notions of civility, and our standing of what we want to do. When you say to people, I'm an environmentalist, I want to go back to nature, I want to live in a space where I depend on on my sheep for eating food and on my having natural milk and have a simple life, they say, oh, this is so romantic and this is so inspiring and this is, yes, we need to go back to nature. If you tell them you want to do that because it helps you become a better faithful person, because it helps you see God more in everything you do, if you go out to nature, they say, oh, again, the religious discourse. Oh my God, no. If you say you can use your hands to eat food, because where I come from, it's not common as you do to eat rice with your hands. No, it's not common. Where I come from, that's not common. It's culture. So you say, use your hands. You say, oh, you want us to do like the Arabs in early Islam? Because some people also say it's Sunnah, okay? But if you say do it because this environmentalist or this naturalistic person or this Buddhist master said, if you touch the food and put it in your mouth, you're closer to nature and it helps you digest better. And so, oh, how interesting. How interesting this is. I should try it. You know, it's like, again, what sort of ideas are we consuming as much as what sort of spaces are we consuming? I suggest that we try to build on that a new discourse. The Islamic discourse for the past 100 years has been stuck in questions asked by the other. It's important to communicate with the other, relate to the other, you know, and we are not others, we are human beings at the end of the day. God says, Ya ayyuhal insan, ya ayyuhan nas. He calls us all as human beings in the Quran. but we also should think about how to initiate our own understanding of the world and to restructure our definitions of politics, community, the self, and happiness. And I think this is a starting point. As a political scientist and political theorist, our sciences have been built on the wrong foundations, and we need to put them back on feet instead of them standing on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Heba. Enlightening talk indeed. I'm sure a lot of you have perhaps some interesting notes as well. At least one of the most simple part, you really like that the place which I'm staying, I'm not sure whether it's Islamic or not, living in a condominium. Perhaps after this there must be a measurement whether it's halal or not halal maybe. Okay, I think to move to continue our discussion, let's have Dato'Dr. Farouk Musa to respond to the talk.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Malik. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dr. Raouf, our guest of honor, Dr. Zul, Dr. Maszlee, and friends, colleagues, professors, and doctors. We are glad to have you over here, and your tour is almost similar to that of Prof. Ramadan in 2012, where we're taking you to Penang under the Penang Institute and also the Penang Islamic Foundation. And actually, to be somehow it correlates very well. We started in 2012 when we started to talk about civil state, and the idea was. I came up with this topic in Penang. It was presented by Prof. Ramadan, Civil State, Ideas and Challenges. So, it correlates very well. That's why I asked you yesterday whether you are related to Tariq Ramadan or not. Well, okay. Now, the whole idea of this civil state came about. If we look back, it was basically from the Arab Spring. When it came, when it happened, Arab Spring, then people were trying to find new solutions to this idea of what it is all about how to govern the state, right? Because they just managed to take over from the corrupt and okay, for a while, just for a while, yeah. Morsi was there, and Ikhwan Muslimun was there for a while, just for a short while. Yeah. So I will start by saying, how do we find a civil state? Even though you have said that, in modern times, you can't find a civil state, right? But this is basically from the American Law Dictionary. Sorry to take from the American Law Dictionary, but it says that it's the union of individual men in civil society and the system of laws, and the magistracy or magistracies charged with the administration of the laws. It is a fundamental law of the civil state that no member of it shall undertake to redress or avenge any violation of his rights by another person, but appeal to the constituted authorities for that purposes, in all cases in which it is possible for him to do so. Hence, the citizens are justly considered being under the safeguard of the law. So this is basically the brief definition of what a civil state is all about, meaning to say that irrespective of whether you're Muslim or you're non-Muslim, whether you are straight or you're gay, you are still under the same law, and you can address your grievances to the state, and the state must be neutral in a way. This idea of neutrality of state was, I proposed that idea when I wrote about the secular state, the arguing about secular state, for example. This idea of the state being impartial or being neutral is very important, and I think to address this issue, it needs impartiality of the state to be ordered to have this civil discourse, or in Professor Naim's word, civic discourse, he calls it. Right? Next, it is possible to conclude that civil state is the antithesis of authoritarian state. Yeah, I would say that if you look at one side, there is authoritarian state, and the other side is a civil state. So this authoritarian state doesn't mean that you must have a dictator like Sisi, for example. Right? This authoritarian state can also be a religious state. a state governed by clerics, by mullahs, or by ulamas, and it can be a communist state or even a capitalist state, for example, as long as they are what they call this. Basically, the ideas imposed by the state go against the will of the people and the majority of the people. Next. Hence, we notice that Islamic reform movement constantly calls for the establishing of a civil state in this sense, and contradicts all forms of the authoritarian state. I would say that this Islamic reform agenda is our agenda in the Iran, and I think I have written a lot about this issue, and I think I somehow or other, when Dr. Zul was still in the Islamic Party, I spoke to him as well and discussed with him, and we came up with these ideas that our aim is not basically to impose hudud and impose Islamic laws, right? And our idea is to establish this form of civility from the society. Yes. So the general or Islamic authority can't be primarily maintained unless we accomplish the mandate of the nation and its full right to choose its own rulers and representatives. Meaning to say that it must be democratic. It cannot be imposed by a certain ruling party to elect certain people, and there is no liberal democracy in a way. There might be democracy, but it might be illiberal democracy. Meaning to say that the state apparatus controls the media, it controls everything under its arms, and there is no freedom of free speech, freedom of expression, there's no freedom of assembly in what's happening in this country. There's, people can be charged indiscriminately, so that's the whole issue. Only when the nation is represented by the honorable will, it will be possible to hold the rulers accountable and ousted for their errors. Therefore, the civil state, in this sense, is the essence of the Islamic reform project. So I would say that that's the beauty of having democracy in a way. Despite its flaws, whatever, we could change the government, when time comes, and every people should have this right to basically to be able to cast what they feel, their ideas, and what they feel of the state and of the government itself. Next one. Yeah. It was not long ago before several Islamic movements replaced Islamic with civil in describing themselves, all the while avoiding terms like secularization, secularism, and non-denominational as concepts concepts continue to carry negative connotations in the broad Arab Muslim countries. Meaning to say, like, we look at, for example, like Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimun, for example, like they talk about civil state. And even if we look at many other Islamic movements, such as in Morocco and in Algeria, they all talk about civil state. Unfortunately, those in this particular country is still talking about establishing an Islamic state, except like moderates and progressive like Dr. Zul, who has left the party and formed a new party called Amanah. So, and I would say that in his put on a highly optimistic analysis of Egypt's 25th January 2011 uprising, left-wing intellectual Muhammad Imarah emphatically affirms that the Islamic State is a civil state. So Muhammad Imarah clearly says the Islamic State is basically a civil state. Now look at our debate at the Islamic University, I think in 2013. And you were the moderator, right, Dr. Maszlee? 2011, yeah. 2011, we had a debate at the Islamic International University. Dr. Maszlee was the moderator. Dr. Zul and I, we were part of the panelists, apart from Dr. Fadlan from the ruling party, from Ulama Muda UMNO. So, yeah. And when Dr. Maszlee posed a question, I still remember until this day, he posed a question. In 2 sentences, describe what you understand by what is Islamic State. And my response to it was, Islamic State is Ad-Dawlah al-Madaniyah. And that was basically a civil state in Arabic terms. Like even Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, in his book Manufactured Dawlah, he mentioned that an Islamic state is a Dawlah al-Madaniyah. So I would say that, you know, like it must be based on institution and on consultation or shura, and that the operative decision-making process requires for its authority to be civil in nature, meaning to say everything goes in accordance with the spirit of democracy, of liberal democracy. I have to stress that word, liberal democracy, because there are illiberal democracies around the world, including this country. For him, the civil state must administer majority preferences to the categories of right or wrong, and not through those of faith or of its rejection, or what we call some people in the Salafi, as you mentioned just now, mentioned as what they call what's the word? The English by reaction. Totally escaped my mind, but it'll come back to me. I was saying that, you know, you have basically is allegiance and disavowal. Al-wala wal-bara. Yeah, that's the word. Al-wala wal-bara. Yeah, allegiance and disavowal. Yeah, it's not based on that. It's not based on, you know, like faith or its rejection or whatever. But it must be based on what is right and what is wrong. So if we say, if we look at our common, you know, current situation in this country, we have issues of, you know, of how do I say, the deceased body being grabbed by the authorities because they were believed to be Muslims in their lifetime, and so on and so forth. So it must be based on right and wrong. You know, what is right, what is wrong? Is it okay to confiscate Bibles, for example? Or is it fine for us to impose certain rules and regulations to avoid people from building churches, for example? Even though it doesn't concern us as Muslims, right? But, you know, like it's the rights of non-Muslims to be able to basically to worship God in their way, in their manner. So I think this is very important. So I would say that next one, that it may be argued that the civil state is based on the foundations of the modern democracy and relies on pluralism and the peaceful rotation of power. Accordingly, the civil state is a status in which democracy versus authoritarian, as it is acceptable and embodies the essence of the nation and the political source of the authority, and proves the principle of its mandate. The civil state, in this sense, is not a criterion in which we evaluate the Islamic movement, but it is the essence of the Islamic cultural project. So this is our project, basically to propose this to people. Right? It's up to people to whether to accept it or not, and we hope that Amanah could basically go out to the villages and talk in the language that is better understood by the people of the, by the people out of cities. So I will end up by this last slide by saying that, to sum up, the comprehensive cultural reform is a scheme prepared to build a civil state based on the mandate of the nation, and primarily leans on an Islamic cultural authority which aims to achieve the modernization and development leading to the Renaissance and progress. So I think that the step forward has been done. Amanah now is at the forefront. I think Dr. Zul himself had written so many articles about this issue, and even though when he was in the Islamic Party, they labeled him with a lot of labels, and they were very much against his ideas of post-Islamism, for example. This is time that we have to have this kind of discourse in this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Farouk. Next, I'll pass to Dr. Maszlee.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and Ustaz and Professor Raouf, Dr. Farouk, Dr. Dzulkefly. You know, I don't know. I've prepared something else, but after listening to Dr. Heba Raouf, it's really, I mean, pushed me back to the memory lane where, you know, we enjoy lovely discussions about politics beyond the discourse of power, especially when we deal with Codians, the serious students, and the others. We try to look what is beyond power, because sometimes power corrupts, and more power
And corrupt.
absolute power corrupts. Corrupt, absolutely. Yeah, it's true. And another thing, when Dr. Heba pointed out a few, I would say, real and essential questions to be answered rather than theoretical and, you know, those kind of rhetoric. It's very important because nowadays we live in a society where we ought or we push to answer theoretical and unrealistic questions that will lead to unrealistic answers. It's not practical at all. But we were pushed to deal with it. So it sway us away from the real question, the reality even, and the danger that waiting before us in the future. So, and the failure of religious scholars, not only in this country but elsewhere, they fail to address that question, and what more, to give answers to those questions. So when you were mentioning about the failure of scholars in dealing with the confiscation of land, but rather busy with the body part of women, that is real. It's not only the case in Egypt, it's everywhere, even in Malaysia. And this is why the other day when I was asked by, I think one of the newspapers, Sinar Harian, said why younger generation, okay, I see a lot of controversial cases here of being today. This is a convention of, you know, illegal or something. Outcast, okay. About why younger people are attracted more towards unconventional, or quote-unquote, call it liberal ideologies or ideas, simply because religious scholars fail to answer essential and realistic questions. Not only they fail to address those questions, and not only they fail to answer those questions, they fail to address those questions. They fail to address those concerns. So, they fail the youth. The youth are searching for it from somewhere else. So, I think it's really important sometimes to look at things beyond the conventional discourse. So when you're mentioning about beauty, about, we rarely talk about politics and love, politics and aesthetic, and friendship, yeah.
And this is literature that we have in
precisely, yeah.
It's new.
It's muted. And if we read Al-Farabi and Madinah Al-Fazila, he said the main objective of politics is to attain happiness, to attain sa'adah. Unfortunately, nowadays we talk about politics, it's about who's getting more billions than the others. You know, that's the reality. And we have to deal with the level of corruption that, you know, pushing us away from all these aesthetic things, from all these real things concerning politics. And, you know, when Al-Ghazali tried to categorize politics, he put it under the discipline of what? Akhlaq. It's akhlaq. It's not under, you know, administration, whatever. Politics is under akhlaq. But nowadays, we talk about politics and politicians, they are the most non-akhlaq people. And politics, you know, I still remember when I was in the UK, I used to work part-time as a cleaner. You know, so it's a normal profession for most Malaysian students there. So I was asked by the bank manager, he said, what are you studying? What are you reading? I said, I'm reading, unfortunately, I'm reading religion and politics. Oh, you're combining two disasters. Two disasters. Yeah, that, unfortunately, okay, but those are the most important things in our life that shape our future. So, talking about is civil state Islamic, whatever, I think Dr. Farouk has explained his position just now. I only want to take two anecdotes. The first anecdote is something to do with my supervisor coming from Sri Lanka. So he's doing his PhD on the issue of minority Muslim in Sri Lanka. So I corrected him, said, you shouldn't categorize yourself as minority. Because Muslims in Sri Lanka, they are indigenous. They should not be categorized as minorities. So I asked him, who are the minorities? Oh, we Muslims, and so I asked them, who are the majorities? The Sinhalese. I said, why? Because they are the largest population. But you guys were born there. You're not minorities in the term of political science. You're not minority at all. You're part of Pribumi, indigenous. Even Malays there, we have Malay community there, I mean, they are Muslims. Even they should not consider themselves. You know, the same thing when I was dealing with our Singaporean Muslims. I told my students in Singapore, you are not minority. You are Singaporean. You are the citizen. You know, Christians supposed to be the minorities in Singapore, but they never call themselves as minority. Christians, Singaporean Christians, Singaporean Muslim, Singaporean Buddhist, whatever. So, the moment you put yourself as minority, you are downgrading your own self. And the moment you put the word minority to yourself, you are making yourself very exclusive from the other. So, he said that after 2009, everything has changed, especially after the government, the Sri Lankan government have managed to defeat HTPA, the Tamil Tiger, and they began to discriminate Muslims. That's what he said, and that is based on what had been written in reality. So we were discussing about the solution. So I told him, I think the only solution is to have politics as a neutral space, to have a neutral national coalition to fight against any kind of discrimination towards any group of people, be them the Tamil, be them Muslim, be them Malayalam, be them whatever they are. I mean, if there is any oppression against them, it should be fought. It should be, you should fight it by the name of democracy, by the name of human rights, by the name of citizenship. So we said, oh, I used the word neutral, and then he came up with an article written that, oh, your idea is very similar to this article. He said that we need a secular national coalition. He said, the same thing. But he said, but we Muslim, we cannot take secular. Come on, he's talking about secular in a meaning. It's a non-religious bias. It's a neutral space. And we need that when we're dealing with power. Because the moment you associate power with certain race or certain sex, variant, certain ethnicity, there will be discrimination. So, I mean, it was a very fruitful discussion, but at the end of the day, I told him that, you know one thing, this is what the civil state is. I mean, you find a solution to solve through the rule of the game. And it comes to the second anecdote. I still remember a student of mine who was teaching in Durham. Originally, her father from Iran, but she was born there, and she considered herself as Welsh British. So, she's a communist, ideologically, but Muslim. Can you have communist Muslim? Yes, we can. She said that. I didn't say anything. Manara, please quote her. Okay. So, no, they are there. They're here. So, she said that after reading all this Islamic stuff on politics, she decided that anarchism is Islamic. Definitely, she said that again, not me. She said, Islam, the closest system to Islam is anarchism. We need no state. We believe in no state. So, I told her, okay, present your argument. If you can substantiate your argument, I cannot say no, that's your finding. But I can criticize. I have my own personal point of view. But let's come again to the discussion of state. Do we really need state? Do we really need state? Or state as a necessary evil? Or state as a leviathan, as a monster, that Hobbes explained it? Or at the first place, do we really need a state to govern us? Now state has replaced God, especially post-Westphalian treaty. The nation state, or the Hegelian notion of a state is God has appeared in human life in the form of state. Because state dictates everything. It's philosophical. But that is the reality. So when Dr. Raouf came up with the idea that actually it's not only state, now you have, whatever you say, urbanization. Urban planning has become another God. Another God. It is God. Come on, please don't misquote me again. Urban planning is another God. Okay, record it and put it on the website, put it virally. Dr. Maszlee has a new God. How is it gonna? Okay. No. A new religion. And the other day we were talking about commercialization, for example. A lot of other things has replaced God. So amongst others is state. And it's very unfortunate sometimes, even amongst political Islamists, they consider state as a goal and not as a mean. To resurrect, to re-erect a caliphate state is the goal and not only as a mean. And we ended up having ISIS, Taliban, and all sort of this. Because for them, this is the pinnacle of Islamic, or of Islamic teaching. Why? Because the ideology of state. And the ideology of state actually was not really derived from Islamic tradition. You're talking about nation state, or modern state, or territorial state, is something that we impose upon us. So, but people will say, so what happened in Medina? Medina, they have a state. Was it a state? Was Medina a state? How did you define it? Was it a dawla? It was not a dawla. It was not a dawla. So how do you define it? It is a state and it is not a state. It is not a state in the definition of modern state that we know nowadays. It has territory, it has constitution, it has, those kind of things. It has its own limitation. It is a state based on the idea of power structure of those states. Because it keeps expanding and sometimes it's shrinking. The idea was all about, and I don't know how to call it. How do you define it, Dr. Heba? Is it it's a kind of power structure rather than a state. And that is part of human nature. Political arrangement, Dr. Heba put it. And that is part of human nature. And this is why Ibn Taymiyyah did not even mention about Khalifa in his book. He did not even deal with the issue of, caliphate or whatever, because he was living in a period where there was no Khalifa. And he said that it is part of human nature to have a political arrangement among them, to elect a leader, to govern them, to protect them. But it is not the goal. It is not things that you put it as, oh, yatuna, this is our game, this is our main aim, main objective. Okay. So, what I'm trying to say here is, as part of human nature, but even nature change according to Dr. Heba. Okay. But that is a purely human nature. We need order. That is why we need state. This is where I strongly believe we need state, but a minimal state.
We don't need
We do need that. Okay. She doesn't need a politician. She doesn't need politicians. I do need politicians to bring my concern in the parliament and to give scholarships to my children. Okay, sorry. Okay, so and to fight corruption. We need politicians to fight corruption before they get corrupted. Yeah. Before they get corrupted. Okay. Okay, so coming back to the idea of state, we need them what we need to minimize the size of state. If you read the history, if you remember, you read Islamic history, what was the role of the state in Islamic history? No, not the state. What was the role of kingdom, emirates, powers, whatever you call that, the Khalifa, the Sultan? They are there to guard, to secure the border, to maintain law and order, rule of law, justice, and the well-being of? No, the well-being is on the hands of the citizens themselves. They are not there to determine the well-being of the people. They were there just to guard the borders, just to secure the peace, and just to maintain law and order. They did not interfere with businesses. They do not interfere with the markets. They don't interfere with people's life. And they do not interfere with religion. That is why religions flourish under the Awqaf. And Awqaf was administrated by the ulama. Ulama was a separate, independent identity from the state. The moment they were co-opted by the state, they started, giving all the justification to support the rulers. The education was not from state. It was left to the people to decide. Jamiatul Azhar, for example, Al-Azhar University, Zaytuna, the oldest university. It was established by a woman, am I right? Yes. And Karawi, was it funded by Awqaf as well? So, state should be minimized. State should be minimized and should be limited on those areas. This is where, but unfortunately, when we read the history, especially after the post-colonial period, we have a tendency to romanticize. We cherry picking all those things on history and trying to portray that, okay, because of these rulers, because of the Khalifa, we flourished, because of the Khalifa, we managed to achieve this and that, but we never talk about the community. We never talk about the achievement of the community, the achievement of certain institutions within the society. You can only find that in the accounts of the travelers, unfortunately, and not the historians. Apart from maybe Al-Bandiri and the others, they did address. But unfortunately, for the Islamists, and for modern Muslim scholars, again, when they're reading their history, they're cherry picking, trying to portray, they take bits and pieces, and trying to strengthen the argument of power, the discourse of power. And then neglecting the larger part of the history, which is the people themselves. Dr. Heba just mentioned it just now, where sometimes we neglect the dynamism of Islamic society, or Muslim society when they manage to administrate themselves. You can find it. Maybe Ibn Battuta has written something about it. Ibn Khaldun has mentioned something about it. How even among the Bazaris, among the farmers, the Falahi, amongst the villages, they manage to administrate themselves. So we neglect the dynamism of society. Society needs to be addressed when we're dealing with the issue of civility. And another thing I think what I would like to say is, talking about the shape of the state, whether it is Islamic, civil or not, I think it's not important. We need to address the real issue. the real issue of separation of power. Last night was a dark, a black dot in the history of Malaysian legal system. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Unfortunately, majority of the people is not aware of that. Why? Because we never been addressed of the real issues. The separation of power. No, never mind. You can still have time to read Malaysia Kini. Oh no, don't read Malaysia Kini. It's dangerous. Read Media Orient. Or maybe it's Facebook. Okay. So the issue of freedom of media, rotation of power, the issue of transparency, free and fair election, these are the real issues concerning the citizens. But the moment you are being taken away from discussing these real issues, you'll be busy talking about rhetorics. And rhetorics will bring us nowhere. And I think that's not from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Maszlee. Dr. Maszlee mentioned about a lot of important points and also raised a lot of interesting questions. Among them, why is it we got like a lot of lousy and corrupt politicians? At least we got like one politician to respond here. Maybe defend the political group. Maybe we come up with a different point of view. So I straight away pass the mic to Dr.
Thank you, Moderator, Professor Heba, Raouf, fellow panelists, Dr. Maszlee Malik, and my brother, Dr. Farouk, Musa, distinguished, enlightened fellow Malaysians, and all. Sorry. I begin with Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Right, I deliberately wanted to speak last because let these academics enlighten you, and I think honestly it's been a very enlightening moment listening to the paper. Thank you very much. No, I'm not trying. I don't need to pretend. But right now, I really do not know where to begin, because there's so much that has been said, and I hope you get the best of all that to discuss. Yeah, this is always this chronic. فَبَشِّرْ عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقَوْلَ وَيَتَّبِعُونَ الْأَحْسَنَ. That is the discerning mind, intellectual mind that could listen to all, yet sift through and get the best. And this afternoon, that's your task. Right, I would begin by apology. That's not the way to begin public speaking for, because of Heba said we started late, and it's all because of I came late. Because they are academic. In academia, I'm a politician. Right, to this program I've got 3 events that I've got to, and it's about an hour and a half away. So I planned it that I should arrive 2:30, but I arrived 2:45. So again, 1,000 people. When you have a politician on board, that is the risk you take. Now, without further ado, I will go on straight to address the subject. I was an Islamic Democrat, and no qualms, I've already stated well before the Rashid Ghanouchi's generational shift of Nahda becoming a Muslim Democrat. I have stated it, and I wrote it incidentally a month earlier, before Rashid Ghanouchi. It's all in my Facebook. And I was there in his convention, by the way, in Tunisia. That momentous moment when Rashid Ghanouchi and Nahda pronounced themselves as moving away from being an Islamic Democrat to Muslim Democrat. I think that is for another discourse, yeah. We wouldn't want to go into that, why, you know, and the entire discourse on that. Now, why I'm going to begin that way is because what I'm going to share with you, something that is coming straight from, is why I'm a bit more fortunate than them. I'm the interface between academia and political actors. I'm maybe sometime wearing academia's clothes, but you know, as a political player, I'm right down there on ground zero, and I know what it is like. Again, and you can be theorizing very lofty ideals. On ground zero, is that happiness delivered? Is that well-being delivered? And by whom? And why? Every so often, politicians are the destroyer. There's now a saying, if you want to destroy something, call him the politician. Okay? So, this is why a person like me, I would want to believe that I am, while I'm speaking this way, I'm free from partisan interests. I render myself to be a critical political player at the end of the day, inshallah, to make a better religion. So in that sense, I will begin by saying this civil state, from my little perusal of the literature, is actually a recent invention. Heba will testify to that, and I could quote many academics and researchers who are actually saying that it is abused by both secularists and Islamists, and with particular reference to Egypt. Now you're rolling your head. I feel a bit more comfortable. Secularist party in Egypt attempt to allude or attempt to advocate the idea of a civil state, what they are championing, because like Malaysians or like Malaysia, there is a natural abhorrence of the Egyptians against anything secular. So they need a terminology that is more appeasing and comfortable for Egyptians. And therefore, civil state comes in very handy. Similarly, Islamists. Looking into the literature, I found that prior to Muslim Brotherhood, Ikhwan al-Muslimin or Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimun, in 1950s, when they start introducing this idea of civil state, going back to what has been said by earlier researchers, the first to introduce the idea of Dawla al-Madaniyah or Dawla Madaniyah is Sheikh Muhammad Abdu, at the end of 20th century, until 1936. Yeah. And what I would like to quickly make mention of this. So, I can understand that the Farouk attempted to put on the slide some definition of what a civil state is. But from the discipline of academia, this word civil state, this terminology of civil state is actually is not really accepted as even in the milieu of Western political thought. There are terms like modern state or secular state, but there's no reference to the term civil state. I've come to realize it as I was researching to come to this kind of intellectual discourse. And and I would like to drive home the message that because it is not coming from that, you know, that political, intellectual kind of evolution, therefore its recent introduction must have come to be serving a certain purpose. And I could already see that all the more political actors and political players needed it, both secularists and Islamists. But I think you just missed the point entirely if you had to debate over this kind of schism and this kind of dialectic between, you know, whether it is Islamic or secular. But I would want to move into something more fundamental than that. And I'm not quite sure why Dr. Heba has deliberately sidestepped the issue of social contract and its role, you know, coming back to Socrates. And I don't know why you do not want to touch on it and how it has become the foundation, more or less, the whole philosophical foundation that, you know, that entirely brings about the individuality being rendered to society, and in the end of the day, forming a society or a state that abides to that norms of social contract, and that is as well the sovereign, and the sovereign suddenly usurp all powers of the individuals in order to render back some form of freedom. I put it in a way non-academic, in simple terms. Now, I think that is very critical. To me, that is very critical because at the end of the day, this debate about wanting to push aside religion from the state, yeah, or by the secularists, relegating the role of religion in the state, and I'm quite sure that Farouk is one of this proponent of this, in the public sphere. I've come to believe that despite the terminology of the civil state not being part of a political development of even Western or even Islamist political thought, but I believe that there are reasons for us to go further into this discourse and provide insight and an enlightening insight of why the civil state, as characterized by Dr. Farouk earlier in some of the slides shown, that it is democratic, that it is neutral, that is what else? Yeah. To me, this is the most interesting part of the whole discourse for me. Because at the end of it, it's about an arrangement, a political arrangement. Could freedom be rendered, given, exercised within the constraint of a social contract, or social norms and values of a particular people within a certain space, land, environment, and the parameters of a political entity. And where this is important, immediately that dialectic, that debate, that divide, that schism between secular and Islamists, to me, is relegated into non-important. What is important is that could we, as to quote Rousseau, Rousseau, man is born free and everywhere he is in chains. The same axiomatic, if I may use that word, principle has been mentioned by Maszlee Ahmad. I thought that you know about the incident, but I'll just quote it when he admonished the son of Amrullah, and who somehow, unjustly treated a non-Yahudi and Omar, and when Omar called Amru al-As, he pronounced it categorically to Amru, Mata ista'battum an-nasa waqad ulidtahum waqad waladathum ummahatuhum ihram. You need to start for this. 3 more minutes. So difficult to to craft and frame my thoughts. So why have you enslaved man when he is born by his or her mother? So in the light of this, I strongly believe that the civil state, characterized by all that we have heard before, I'm not going to repeat, the contest and the political contestation, if I may use that word, is finally about bringing a nation, or now a nation state, to betterment and realizing the objective of total well-being, happiness, and whatnot. And exercising all this and achieving freedom, not unbridled growth, and what does it take for that contestation to happen within a democratic setup, within a democratic construct? Is finally for each and every political player to come with some reference. And that's for a Muslim Democrat like me, I come with Islamic reference. While I respect all your right to dissent and differ with me, right? I will, I would believe that I would also have the right to advocate my cause and my belief and my conviction. And that is very crucial. I may, what does he say? I may differ with you, but I'll fight for the right to advocate. Now, so fellow friends, I've come to understand this subject. Is the Islamic State Islamic? Sorry, is the civil state Islamic? Or Islamic State civil? I want to conclude here right now because I only got a few more minutes to round it up. I have stated earlier on that the civil state is neither a Western origin nor Islamic. Okay, done. And and both secularists and Islamists have come to quote unquote abuse this, or wanting to write on it to make them look good in the eyes of the electorates and voters. Okay. But what mattered to me most would be, would that civil state be able to achieve total well-being or well-being of humanity and achieving freedom within a social construct of a social contract where the government is supposedly to be the custodian of it all. But I'm going to talk about this government again. They're just doing the antithesis of whatever is civil and whatever is Islamic. They are neither civil nor democratic nor Islamic. This is just one, I don't want to describe it. So, make sure that they will not be anywhere in Putrajaya for the next election. So friends, I conclude by saying, is civil state Islamic? I wish that civil state would be Islamic. And I, as a political player, is around to advocate my Islamic references. Because I believe, it's not just because it is transcendental, Dr. Heba. It's just not because it is coming from God. I don't represent God either. But I believe that I have the right to present an efficacious, whatever you call it, corpus of legal prescription you know, if it is so legalistic, but I go beyond that. I present an Islamic reference that brings about mercy, compassion, freedom, and respect for others as the cardinal and critical principle in enjoining and advocating and establishing that civil state. I say with all my conviction. Therefore, the fiqh that is most important for Parti Amanah Negara will not be, sorry, it's certainly not RU 355 again. It is fiqh of at-ta'ayush, fiqh of coexistence that embodies and reflects the true Medinian embodiment of a pluralistic, multi-ethnic, multi-religious society that is enshrined in the rahmah وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ of the prophet wisdom and prophetic wisdom in whatever you call that. You want to call Medina political entity, political state. That is not, it's just like Kuala Lumpur, you know, it's not as big as Medina is. By way of population, you must understand. It's not, you know, it's not a political entity that is, you know, few millions or whatever. But the fact remains that it is prophetic wisdom and the message of Islam, the liberating message of Islam, that provides that freedom. And the Prophet from day one enshrined it in the Medinan constitution and called them lahum ma lana wa alayhim ma alayna, to them lahum ma lana, for them their rights as of us Muslims, lahum ma lana wa alayhim, and on them the responsibility is much as it is on us. But totally, if I may use the word, a totally egalitarian, equal society that is very civil, my friends. This is what we achieve, this is what we aspire of the Malaysian as a nation. And this is truly, you know, embodied in the fiqh of ta'ayush, the fiqh of mawatin. There is another fiqh, there is another jurisprudence, another aspect of fiqh which is about citizenship. Muwatana, fiqh al-muwatana. And if I may conclude by saying, sorry guys, I conclude by saying what Professor Loai Safi says when he, you know, in his writing, what Muslim and Islamists or whatever should be fighting for is that linasa iqamatu dawlah madaniyah tarma masalih al-mawatin laysa dawlah diniyah tarma masalih al-muslimin. If I may translate that, we strive to achieve a civil state that takes into account the interests of all, not just Muslim, and not a religious state or an Islamic state, so to say, that only caters for the middle Muslim. Well, friends, these are perhaps new discourses that we've got to go further and dwell further. And I think I've come to conclusion on this round, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Okay, before we go to the floor for any comments and questions, just a kind reminder that we invest in good series now, so that it's not related to the discussions. Okay, now I would like to open the floor. Anyone with questions or comments, please raise your hands. You want me to start first? So it's so usual that the first person want to give the first question is me. A bit slow, I guess, but later everyone will start with the hand. So anyone would like to volunteer to give the first question? Thank you. The first question is.
So, my name is Rin. My question is directed to Dr. Heba. A few days ago, I read in a local paper a non-Muslim actually commented me. Okay, there was an article in a local paper here in Malaysia. The title was, I do not want to pay income tax to fund religious institutions. The writer of this article is a non-Muslim, a lady, and I'm pretty sure after this her face will be marked for persecution, especially in this country. So she gave reasons which are factual, which is pretty real. She says that she's a Christian, basically, so she pays teeth to her church to fund any religious activity. So her proposal, the reasons why she says she doesn't want to continue paying income tax to fund religious institutions because of the activities of these religious bodies. She gave examples of, body snatching is not part of it, confiscation of, for example, religious books of other religions, persecution against religious temples, for example, and also conversion of minor children by disgruntled spouses upon divorce. They convert to Islam and forcibly, unilaterally convert children and denying the rights of the parent remaining as a non-Muslim. My question is whether in either a civil state or an Islamic state, whether that is possible. Because in this country, basically religious bodies, institutions are funded by the state, by the government, by taxpayers, both Muslims and non-Muslims alike, male, female, gay, bisexual, whatever not. If our income is taxable, that is where the funds come from. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else want to have questions or comments? Because we were just going to combine 3 questions from anyone else? For now? Okay, please. Stand.
I have a weak ankle, so you can see my balance is not all that great. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Heba. Good to see you. I didn't expect to see you here. And, I think something's wrong with the mics, but I'll try again. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Heba. Good to see you. Twice a year. I think it's okay.
I speak loud.
I think you need the mic because we're recording.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Heba, and distinguished panelists. This was great and interesting, and I learned so much. I mean, Dr. Heba basically has become my unofficial mentor and guru, just because she speaks to the questions that have always been lingering in my mind, and she, doesn't pull any punches. So I'm a student in Qatar, Hamad bin Khalifa University, and she graced us with her presence there earlier this year. My question comes from her statement, tying politics to basically environmental existence, the real, state of the world, human nature, and not separating those two things, and then talking about urban planning, because my interest is environmental policy. And I totally agree, and my upcoming thesis is to try and look at why the Muslim majority countries and the Muslim world in general are always last when it comes to, I think, cleanliness. And Allah min al-Iman, that's what I thought our religion taught us, but I don't see it when I live, I work, or I walk in a Muslim majority country. So do you think that if we were to have a Muslim majority country, and we want to call that Islamic, in order for it to become a civil state, that the environmental battle should be their #1 priority? And by that I mean not giving or selling their souls to the devil by competing for the capitalistic selling land and getting rid of poor people and inequality, but also just really, there's so much treasure here, so much natural resources, so much greenery, but for how much longer? So I was hoping that you can answer that question about the environmental battle as being maybe one of the priorities for a Muslim civil state or an Islamic civil state. And really quickly, I just wanted to ask Dr. Maszlee, if possible, why he didn't think the well-being of the people was a responsibility of the state.
One final question before we let the panel respond. One.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Mohammed Hussain from UAE. I'm studying history and civilization. So I would just like to point out that I'm missing Dr. Ahmad. He would be talking to Ibn Khaldun. So nobody actually, I came late, so I'm not here if anybody actually spoke of Ibn Khaldun. But I think it would be very relevant since you're talking about Islam and Muslims and contributions. So in a previous lecture you gave somewhere in YouTube on why Halaf's impossible state. So I think you pointed out that he was referring to the fact that the modern state is all about controlling nature, the level of control that mankind can have. That has increased in modernity. So one thing I'm interested in is that it has also been about controlling the nature of man. So like in the modern state, we see that people are under surveillance all the time. So in an Islamic state, would this surveillance lessen or would it actually increase? How would we justify either? Thank you.
Brother Hussain, okay, just try to summarize the few questions which were asked. First, on the religious institutions and how does it relate to taxation, particularly non-Muslim and also those who are not favoring religious-based policies. I believe the question was not being addressed to Okay, on the second question on environmental policies and why is it Muslim countries are actually quite backwards when it comes to environmental situation. And also the question to Dr. Maszlee on why is it well-being is not something which he himself can see as important for an civil or Islamic state. Except one question on sorry, this question surveillance. Sorry, yes, surveillance. So I think let Heba respond first.
Thank you very much. Though I was challenging the notion of the civil state, the question repeated the same approach, and they said, in the civil state, if it is Islamic, would that and that be acceptable? What do you think? So, I will say what I think. Okay? So, I don't again speak for an Islamic state. I don't speak in the name of an Islamic state. But when you were talking about a citizen, a Christian citizen of Malaysia, doesn't want her money of taxes to go to supporting religious institutions that do not respect religious diversity, as far as I understood. I think this is her right. And I think that citizens broadly have the right to prioritize in some aspects where their money will go and supervise that. And with new technology, it is not very hard because, for example, we once suggested in Egypt 2012 that people would donate to support the finances of the country, the budget, the national budget. And at the time when people said, oh, we are willing to finance the budget, we are having inflation and we are having a crisis at the debts of Egypt, etc., so why don't we donate to the country? And we're very enthusiastic. And my opinion was at the time, okay, I'm willing to donate for the country, I'm willing to give everything and even invite people to give, women to give their gold, as we did during the war, the independence struggle of Algeria. It was very common to lead campaigns in Egypt at the time because we were very socialist and nationalist, to donate money for the independence struggle of Algerians. But I would like to know where the money would go, and I would like to track it. DHL allows you to track your
post, you know. So why not the country allows you to track your donations or to track your taxes? So, and you prioritize. You say, of course, there are sections where you don't have the right to. So, say for example, I pay $100 every year, even in an example. So 20%, I don't have the right to decide because it's like goes to the public finances generally. And then I say, I want my money to go more to education or to rural development or to this. So this is my opinion personally that this holistic approach should be more diversified and divided so that I know where my money goes. For example, during times of war, it would be definitely be considered treason that you say, I don't want to fund the army because I'm not convinced about the war they are leading against terrorism, but it's not against terrorism, it's against citizens. So this would be very, very serious issue, and then you would be accused of going against the national interest of the country. So it needs to be discussed how far a citizen has the right to decide where his taxes go. This is worth looking into. I remember, it's not only about Malaysia, I remember that I was in Sweden with a Muslim, staying with a friend who is a Muslim convert, and she is living in Gothenburg. And she said to me that part of the taxes, because the official religion is Christianity, goes to the church. And she said, in order for you as a Muslim to say, I would like my money to go to the mosque, you have to go and make a claim. So it doesn't go automatically that once you are classified as a Muslim, the money goes or doesn't go according to your decision to funding the Iftah authority or whatever. She says that her money goes automatically as a citizen to part of the tax goes to the church. And they have to claim that Islam is the religion, so you have in first place in a secular society to prove that you are a Muslim, to raise the issue that I am not just a Swedish citizen, I am a Muslim Swede, which is Swedish, okay? And I don't want my money to go, please direct my money to this or that cause. So I came across that request oppositely. It's a Muslim convert in Sweden. So it is an issue that is, I think, definitely worth mentioning, including the bit of fishy and risky consequences of that regarding if you are a pacifist and you don't want to fund the army, would you have the right to do so, or would you consider betraying the country's ultimate goals? So we have to look into it. Because the political question is more important than the sectarian. There are serious political issues at hand if we open this forum. So I go from the very specific to the very broad. Regarding environment, why there was no interest in environment, I would analyze that definitely sociologically and politically in history rather than religiously. Because I think that across history, on the contrary, actually if you read the history of awqaf, of endowments, Muslims endowed money. Interestingly, these fantastic Muslims endowed money to cats, to put milk to cats on the streets, to put meat for pigeons in the yards of mosques. And people bothered even to think about what if a small child is working and then while he was handing a liquid from one place to the other, because he is a child, he was not concentrating, he fell, and the capital was lost. And there was an endowment to compensate for whatever was lost by children who are working but were not very careful about what they were transporting or moving from one place to the other. So this is a mind that is very specific, very complex, and very compassionate, and very rahim. So how come then that we dealt with nature and environment in such a lousy way in our... I think somehow, politically speaking again, the sense of loss of social responsibility with the creation of the territorial state that claimed itself to be a moral agent. The state tells you, if you see an accident, don't interfere. I'm not an expert. Call dial 900, okay, or 9010 or whatever, and we will come and take care of everything. You can't. You stay there and watch. Use your mobile and call us. None of your business. Okay? What if I can have? You're not an expert. You can cause more harm if you interfere and move the person, and it might affect his body in a negative way, etc. But I want to do something. I want at least to help him. No, it's none of your business. The wider title was Rule of Experts. Okay? You don't know how to do things. We know. We will do things and you step aside. And according to that, in the nation state, modern nation state, there was a transfer of functions. You don't know how to educate your children. You are too backwarded, you are ignorant. You will take them and educate them. So transfer of function of education to the state from the awqaf or from the madrasas or from the local communities. And now look at the level of the governmental education and the public education in many countries in our world. I think that this affected very much a sense of responsibility of the people towards the environment, plus colonialism, that actually made them feel the country is not ours anymore. You know, it's like, why should I care if the British or the Dutch or the French are going to take everything, and if I donate or if I care, they are the ones who benefit, you know. So there was a focus on struggle of independence and struggle for freedom, but there was not a care of the environment, like even if it is colonialized, I'm going to look after it because this is my responsibility. I'm rahmatul alamin under colonialization or without colonialization, you know. So I think it affected the morale of people somehow, because in history we didn't have that. On the contrary, we were very much caring of the environment. We were asked even, we were told that if you, in the middle of the desert, put a tree, you put the seeds of a tree, every creature, not human being, creature, that would pass and stay under the shadow of that tree would count. This would count in your thawab and good deeds on the day of judgment. So how come that we shifted from this to that? I think it must have been the loss of a sense of communal responsibility, and we should look into why we lost it. We had it in a very fantastic way, and also the sense of you need to bring back what we call in modern language a sense of ownership of your own country. People feel like this is not my problem, and unfortunately Islamic movements did that to people as well. Somehow, people felt like, oh, Islamic movements are there, I should not take care of my religion. I mean, I shouldn't defend my religion and promote it, etc. Well, there are these Islamic groups and movements and parties, and they're doing a good job, you know. So somehow, generation after generation, person after person felt like somebody's doing a good job. I can be a bit more. And some people even told me that, you know, like, I'm not a good Muslim, I'm not practicing, but I like the good ones, and they are looking after religion, and one day I will come around and join. I want to enjoy my life, you know, wear my bikinis and go around and be a bit foolish in my life and enjoy life. And then one day I'm a good at heart, and I have a good relation with God, and one day I will come around and just join again. And I know that I love you, you good people who are looking after our faith, etc. This delegation went from the political to the religious to the cultural to someone else is doing the good job. And that's why I always tell my students, and when I go to mosques and preach, etc., I do that also. I say, consider yourself to be the last Muslim. Always consider yourself to be the last Muslim. As if you are the last one on earth who is carrying the message of Islam. And act accordingly. Don't be light-minded about your Islam. You know, consider yourself to be the last one carrying the message, not just one amongst many billions and millions. So this is very important. Surveillance. I supervised the translation of a series of books by Ezzat into Arabic, and one of them was Liquid Surveillance. And it came out a year ago, and I wrote the introduction. So I do think that surveillance is a production of modernity because of the massive society. You need to provide security, and you can't have a police officer around every corner. And sometimes it helps fight crime, but it also helps the government collect information about people, and it makes you under scrutiny and under the eye of the state all the time. Of course, the security issue is important, but we can say that 10% security provided 90% control. So we have to, again, talk about it. It's not about Islam or not Islam. I mean, I don't need to go to the Quran to find a paragraph or an ayat regarding surveillance. I'm a citizen and I have my Islam. And you know how we think Islamically. We think Islamically when we really understand Quran and Sunnah and think. It's not about only carrying the text under your arm or flipping through the book when a fatwa is needed, you know, or it's about genuinely being a Muslim and then thinking about the world. And this is how Prophet Muhammad taught his companions. He didn't tell them, these are the instructions, follow them, 1, 2, 3, 4. He said to them, what if you go to some place and people ask you about something and you run out of answers? And he said, then I would just, reflect and give them my opinion. He said, okay, but beware. When this happens, don't tell them this is the opinion of Islam. Tell them this is my opinion, so in case it's wrong, you don't make fitna. You don't make them feel like, oh, this Muslim came around and told us so and so. Distinction is very important. And I remember when you were talking about Medina as well, I translated the book of Dato'Dr Sardar of Mecca into Arabic. And it actually appeared already. You said that it will appear in library, in bookstores in September. It actually came out already. It's a very interesting book. It's about the history of Mecca. And I enjoyed very much. It was a hard endeavor to translate from English into Arabic and to all the things that he explains to non-Arab-speaking Muslims. I mean, I just tried to go through them softly because he explained to a non-Muslim when it appears in Arabic. The translation issue is very tricky. So one of the things that struck me, and I never noticed it actually, to say the truth, and I learned it from Sardar. So it was a very, very sharp remark. He's a very, very bright, sharp person, mashallah, and his endeavor in life to find answers, even sometimes we don't agree with some of his ideas, is just deserves respect. So he said something very important. He said, didn't you notice that Prophet Muhammad established a political community in Medina? And then there was the Fath of Mecca. He opened Mecca and went back, and then he had the first pilgrimage showing Muslims, the first and last, the only pilgrimage he had, Hajj, and he taught Muslims how to perform Hajj. He didn't stay in Mecca. He went back to Medina, which is striking. We know this fact, but we never tried to ask why. It was very logical to stay in Mecca. The Mecca that he loved, the Mecca when he left Mecca, he cried and he said, if your people did not force me to go out of you, I would have stayed in you, and he talked to Mecca as in a loving manner, and the way he used to remember Mecca, and the way he loved Mecca. But when he had the opportunity, and there was the victory of Islam, and Mecca was open, and he had Mecca back, between the Qibla of the faith and the city of the political community. And across history, no caliphate was based in Mecca. It was in Baghdad, it was in Damascus, it was all over the place, but Mecca stayed the Qibla of the faith, not the Qibla of politics. This is very important to reflect upon, and I think if we give it more thought, we can come up with a lot of discussion around that. It's not a separation of secularism, separation of faith and politics. It's about distinction of spaces, roles, functions, and the raison d'etre of areas and spaces and spheres. And this is very important. Very strong.
Okay. Based on what you mentioned, distinction between the religion realm and the political realm, I think I would suggest you guys to have a look at an article written by Maszlee Malik, the current Prime Minister of Morocco. He was a psychiatrist. Still, now he's Prime Minister. Okay, he's a psychiatrist, come ulama, come politician, combining himself all the disastrous elements. Anyway. Okay, I think your question had been answered by Dr. Heba, actually. She was pointing out at the idea of big state. When you have big state to determine what is good and what is not for you, what is well-being and what is not, and they dictate how to implement that well-being, that's the end of society. That's the end of individuals. The discharge of responsibility. It's not my job to clean whatever mess in front of my house. It's the municipality job. It's the state job. It's not my job to help poor people when I see them on the street. It's the job of ministry of this, ministry of that. Okay. This idea of discharge of responsibility is dangerous actually. It should be considered that you should ask yourself, what should I do? Okay. That comes back to the idea of environment. Let me quote you an anecdote. I think the year 2011, just after our forum, I was invited to Japan as part of their, they call it ASEAN Young Scholars Convention or whatever. I was still, fellowship, yeah. I was still young then, I'm still young now. You know, they brought us to certain places, and with us are another academics from Indonesia, from Singapore, from Philippines. So after watching and after witnessing all those, you know, Japan is Japan. The cleanliness, the level of tidiness, everything is organized. You wouldn't find late train, late coach or whatever, everything on time. So, you know, in one of our meetings with the Japanese professors who were specializing in Islamic studies and Southeast Asian studies, so one of our friends from Indonesia was saying that everything here is superb. This is Islam without Muslims. Unfortunately, back in our country, we are Muslims without Islam. And that Japanese professor was astonished. He said, this is not the first time people are telling me about this thing. The other days when we have, you know, imams from Egypt, from Pakistan, from everywhere, they were saying the same thing. But for me, it's not about Islam or Muslim. It's about common sense. These are common sense. This is well-being. This is well-being. So, we should live with common sense. Nobody wants to live in untidy environment. Nobody loves dirt and messy environment. Everybody wants everything to get organized. Everyone to live in a well-being manner. So he said, I think, he came up with his solution. He said, I think it's not the issue of Islam or not, but it's rather the issue of education. The level of education. What we educate our people. But I would like to add something more on it. The way we understand religiosity. I still remember I was asked by one of the star reporters, he said, don't you think that our community now is becoming more religious? He said, Muslims are becoming more religious. I said, excuse me, what did you say? He said, Muslims are becoming more religious. I said, I don't think so. They're becoming more religious. They're becoming more conservative, yes, but how do you define religiosity? She said, people started to put on hijab, started to put on skull caps, started going to the mosques, said, you know, those kind of things. I told her, that is not religiosity, that is trendy. I couldn't imagine people that you described, when they wanted to go to the mosque, they just park their cars or their motorbikes anywhere, and sometimes blocks mine. I couldn't imagine people with the characteristic that you have mentioned, throwing, you know, whatever they have inside the car, or the cigarette outside the car. I just couldn't imagine if people with those characteristics, when they see disabled people, they're not thinking on how to teach our government, to push our government, to promulgate better policies to help those vulnerable people. For me, it's the way we understand religion. That is why it's very interesting when we mention about Muhammad Abdul, we should not forget Jamaluddin Afghani, the guru. This is your guru. The guru of Muhammad Abdul was Jamaluddin Afghani. Jamaluddin Afghani, when he was commenting about the situation of Muslims during his days, not now, during his days, said why they were very underdeveloped in compared to the colonials. Unfortunately, he was in France. Said because they are losing the collective shape. I'm translating it literally into English, but it was mentioned in Professor Hussein Alatas. Somebody was mentioning Farid. Farid's father, late father, he mentioned in his book about Rasuah, about corruption. He said, what we miss in Muslim society is this malu secara collective. We lose that. We don't feel ashamed when we see a lot of dirt on our streets. We don't feel ashamed of the potholes on our roads. We don't feel ashamed when we are driving over limit, over the speed limit. We don't feel ashamed when we look that our disabled children are being abandoned. They have been left out from the society. They have been left out by the educational system. So without this feeling of collective shame, we cannot develop. To be a developed nation, we must have that. And in order to have that, the way we understand religion, the way we understand religiosity should be upgraded. It should go beyond personal issues and spiritual issues. It should go towards the idea of well-being that you mentioned. And it should not be dictated by the state. It should be dictated by the people through their understanding of religion based on the originality of the source and akal and common sense. They ignore common sense, they go into literal interpretation, they ended up to be like ISIS. If they using akal without the authentic sources, it'll be something else. So we need to combine. And there's one thing I was about to say. Common sense, well-being. So what is the role of state then? The role of the state, just like I mentioned to you, should be minimized to secure the border, to ensure law and order, rule of law, and to ensure policies that will benefit people. Public policies that will benefit people. And they must allow a huge space for society to excel and to take care of themselves. Thank you very much. Yes.
I wanted to add something to what you were saying that came up to my mind. An understanding of shame and an understanding of social and moral responsibility entails an understanding of time. And this is one of the lessons in the Quran that have been neglected. In the Quran, God says, and they will carry the burden of their bad deeds and other burden of other bad deeds. وَيَحْمِلُنَّ أَوْزَارًا مَعَ أَوْزَارٍ. And the consequences and the sequence of your action in time and space is very important to imagine. It's part of building a Islamic imagination. Like when I was teaching my children not to throw something, and I was driving and my son simply had his ice cream and then he threw the pig. And I stopped the car and I went back and said to him, pick it up. I said, come on mommy, I mean the street is not clean. And يعني ما جاتش عليا, it's not me يعني, you focus on me and everyone threw his things outside. I said to him, yes, because after you, other people will come and say the same thing and you will be responsible for yet another person who will say, it's not only you. Don't pick it up. Okay? The sequence of actions. If I do something wrong publicly, it's not about, oh, you're not doing the good thing, you are not doing the wrong thing because it's wrong, but because you are afraid that people will say something and you'll be shamed and named, etc. It's not about that. It's not about that I don't do the bad things because people look at me. And this is bad enough, because you should do it because it's wrong. You shouldn't do it because it's wrong. But because, as a Muslim, I think, I would be ashamed of meeting God, having caused such a sequence of bad events. When people see me doing something wrong publicly and they say, look, even her, even him, who is such a very famous person, is doing this and that. Why should you blame me? If those people can do something like that and it goes unnoticed, I can also do something like that and it goes unnoticed. Beating women goes unnoticed because men simply saw it happening in their families and in their neighborhoods and nobody raised a finger to stop it. And they say, everyone is beating his wife. It's common practice, Why should you look at me and say, they do not get straightened up unless you give them and smash them on the head, Because he saw people doing it and nobody's. That's why Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar, forbidding the bad and asking people to do the good, is very important. So I think what matters in social action is that people think this way. There is another way of Islamic thinking which is calculating of expenses. If I buy an expensive bag, what is the most expensive? The French one with the Louis Vuitton. It costs something like $200, $300, $3,000. And then I start calculating. If I buy a similar bag, where I simply, as usual, throw my stuff inside that is completely not organized. This is my bag. Very disorganized. Very anarchist. Okay, so I have this small bag. I bought it because it has so many zips. Trying to train myself to be more organized. Okay, if I buy it This one is in a sale. It is a Samsonite. Looks nice. It's okay. Yeah. It has so many things that, and I think it cost me $30, $35. I think so I start calculating when I start spending money, because God will ask me about the money I spend, how I earned it and how I spend. And I say this is equal to 100 Louis Vuitton. I can buy, if I can spare $3,000, then buy yourself this nice bag. It's very useful, it's good quality. And buy 100 bags and gives them to young students in the university, poor ones who are not able to buy new ones. This is a way of calculating. And you do it all the time. You say, if I spend this, I will do that. Okay, I can treat myself a bit, but at the same time, okay, buy something else and give it to someone who has the money. I cannot think about buying an expensive car, because I always have this way of thinking, if I buy myself a Mercedes, this is equal to 10 Opels and it's equal to like 50 small Fiats, for example. And my mind works this way. That's why I don't usually wear brands, and because I know that one thing is politics of compassion. I care for those who don't have, and I feel ashamed actually of having something so expensive and others are just sleeping on the street. And at the same time, I know that on the day of judgment, I will be asked by God, what did you do and what did you do? Not because I'm perfect, because I was taught that by Islam. Sometimes I don't do this because I'm a human being, but we have to teach our generation and children how to think differently about the consequences of their actions and how to calculate the good life. What is a good life? For me to have everything and someone else is living nearby who has nothing. So what is a good life for me? This is not a good life for me. I will not feel happy to have something while others don't have anything. So this way is a sense of social responsibility. It's not only environmental, it's social as well. But people more and more were taught to think about themselves, where the notions that were marketed are notions of self-fulfillment, look for your own, the notion of time is money, for example. I can't do that because time is money, it just takes too much time. The whole notion of compassion is about spending your time in doing things that will not get you money. My dear, compassion is about spending time that is equal to money without getting anything, because you feel that you will get it on the day. It's a notion of time, by the way. It's very philosophical, and it's very epistemic. It's about the epistemology of Islam. And if we think this way about politics, about society, about the self, about happiness, about living our life, about what does it mean to have a good life, I think many things will change in our society.
I'll just add for one last round of questions against all of this responding. Okay, anyone with a question, just make it short and straightforward.
This is open to the my name is Sean. My question is Malaysia a civil state? Is Malaysia a civil state? And if it is it Islamic? That's the first question. Right. Second question is. Okay, one question. Okay, then yeah.
I want to change the question a bit. We all seem to be discussing how religion affects the state or the state affects religion. But the understanding of religion is not actually discussed in any way. I mean, the example given is the recent case in Saudi Arabia where a lady wore a miniskirt and was put on the internet. Everybody got such a fuss over it. But every day they've been seeing people being bombed in Yemen. And no ulama ever complains. And I'm also thinking that, we should be discussing what kind of Islam do you want. So the way it's portrayed in Malaysia, especially the ulama or the faqih, only seems to discuss trivial issues. They become totally irrelevant to what's happening in society. Whether it's the issue of corruption, whether it's the issue of poverty, this doesn't seem to be an Islamic issue. But if some lady takes off her tudung, it's a total uproar, as if, Islam but when somebody sells a tudung for $3,000 or $800, that's not an issue. So how do we change these priorities? I mean, if religion is to be relevant, or to be made relevant, especially in this case, if we're still going to decide whether Malaysia is an Islamic state, not an Islamic state, maybe should we decide what Islam is first?
Anyone, one last point? No? 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Dr. Hisham is a lecturer of Usuluddin from UIA.
Okay, I will start with Mr. Farouk to respond to the questions. 5 minutes each for all speakers.
Let me take a very short thing. I'll just respond to the second question. I guess if you if you were here during my presentation, then I guess the answer should be straightforward. We have seen my definition on what is a civil state, and definitely Malaysia doesn't at all fulfill the condition to be a civil state. Thank you.
That's a really short answer. Right. Let me. I'm sorry. I would have this to say. Despite us trying to really get to either the Islamists or the secularists, I think we have been able to discourse without having to resort to any kind of name calling. Right? The entire discourse was to be very civil, because we were actually hoping to achieve at the end of the day an enlightenment. That's a lot that was Heba provided today. Let us give a big applause for that. Now, I would want to only say this, that because we are able to do that today, this is what, I'm not proselytizing, this is what Parti Amanah Negara intends to do. Okay? We want to make this Islam, as Dr. Isham has said earlier, what Islam that we want to advocate is finally about life fulfillment. It's finally about achieving the maqasid, the purpose and the higher intents of Islam, rather than, sorry for my explanation, rather than RUU, rather than a punitive punishment-based Islam, rather than that mere legal corpus of legal prescription. You want to have Islam that could be imbued in the civil state. Islam as a reference, not Islam that is coming by way of a coercion and compulsion on others. Morally, what is the word? Policing almost every action to provide the freedom within a certain constraint, within a certain social construct and contract, which is essentially the constitution that we all subscribe to. We would like to see Islam, Parti Amanah Negara, we would like to see that all the policies and advocacies and the legislative process of this nation to have what? Our point of view, betterment from, as far as we're concerned, so I have no comment to say this, from Islamic references. That is our raison d'etre. Meaning, we have values to share. We have principles that we feel would be for the betterment of others. We are not saying that we are holding them down, but we believe that we, through this contestation, through this democratic process, electoral and otherwise, would achieve a civil state with Islamic preferences. You can turn up to me and say, why call it Islamic? It's just that because we are Parti Amanah Negara, we have Islamic preferences. And you may have correct view. And that constatation would be very exciting, fulfilling, and sugar. No, oh yes, I'm sure I can do that. But this is what in short, in a nutshell, what Party Amanah Negara stand for. Because we believe we are the second generation political Islamists, or rather political parties which is now known as the Muslim Democrat, and our main advocacy is finally to achieve the higher intents of Islam, the higher intents of Sharia, rather than picking on only that legal, punitive prescription of Islam.
And I just want to focus on 2 points that were discussed through the interventions. Because I think when we talk about the community, we're talking about the social contract, but at the same time, I have a problem with the notion of contract, because contract actually sort of encapsulates some of the agreements in writing or in set rules, while actually the speed of change that we are witnessing will lead to...
It's very dynamic.
Yeah, so I'd rather focus more on the rules of deliberation and the mechanisms of deliberation that would renew that imagined contract all the time, rather than have... That's why I think constitutions are, on one hand, a good idea, but on the other hand, problematic, because it's very hard to change the constitution in modern systems while the constitution is outdated in the course of time. So I just want to focus on 2 issues that we discussed in the different interventions. One thing is, again, the time. And I talked about the city and the importance of understanding the urban dimension of civility. It is very much embedded in day-to-day life. And we have been thinking about our topics in a grand narrative, in a long durée, in the long time span imagination. And I think it's very important to focus, and this is what we learn from fiqh. People have always been blaming fiqh for being too particular and too much focusing on the details, but unless you understand the details, you are not seeing the wider picture. That's why fiqh and usul al-fiqh come together. Fiqh, it teaches you what to do in detail, and usul al-fiqh teaches the methodology. This big narrative or big vision, in a way, is very important as well. So how to combine both, how to understand religion in terms of its in terms of religion as a paradigm, the notions in the very epistemic sense, but also how to understand the little bits and pieces that actually form the mosaic picture of your exercise and your religious practice and religious experience as well. Because religion is also an experience, and there is a big dimension of culture. While culture should not impose itself on religion, we will not understand religiosity unless we understand the importance of culture and the respect of culture, because you will not be able to understand faith detached from its context. The second point that I want to stress, so that we take it along with us when we are leaving, is that always relate theory to your own life and try to theorize your life as well. I mean, when you go through an experience, try to see the ultimate wisdom of it, instead of just falling into the trap of that it is very peculiar. Try to draw the lines between what you are going through and a wider perspective of life, and the lessons that can be learned for you and for others as well from what you're going through. And I think that when we're talking about the experience of the state, and Professor Farouk, you mentioned the Muslim Brothers in Egypt, for example, I have always told the young people who dropped out of the Muslim Brothers or are married now, that you should see also the Muslim Brothers within their own context. The problem is that they did not claim that what they are doing is very much relative to their experience. They said, نحن جماعة ربانية. They said, we are a holy group of people. And this was the faith and mistake right from the beginning of the da'wah of the Muslim Brothers in the writings of Hassan al-Banna. And I think that this sort of elevating self-ego of I am the good Muslim, every Muslim is a good Muslim as long as he takes Islam in his hand and tries to improve the world with it. And regarding the appearance and the day-to-day life practices, one of the most beautiful things I saw in Istanbul for the past year is the woman who came into the mosque She was wearing trousers. She's at the same age as mine, in her early 50s, a bit chubby, with a t-shirt, okay? And she looked like someone who's passing, because what is so beautiful in Istanbul, people go to the mosque to stay. You know, you can find old people in the garden of the mosque just sitting there. They might not even go to the prayer when it's cold, you know, but they're just, you know, they like the space, they like the serenity, whatever. And she went in, and we have this made up. We have this place, fountain of water, where people perform wudu. In my country, women never make wudu, of course, in public, because they go to the closed spaces. And this woman was not veiled in the first place. So she just went straight to the Maida in the middle of the mosque. She started making wudu, and she finished, and then she took out of her bag a scarf, and she stood on a side and she prayed. She took away the scarf, went out, and I'm looking at her and I said, this is so beautiful. That Muslims feel safe in the spaces of faith and religiosity, not feel unsafe because they will be always judged by the way they act, the way they talk, or the way they look. And I think this is very important, to bring back safety and a sense of security to the spaces of practice of religion in our
I was thinking of something else. When you start recording something else. It's true. I mean, it's very unfortunate. Religion issue are very stressful nowadays. Religion itself is a stressful issue. You know, and religion has been portrayed, or has been, what do you perceive, practiced as something that will divide people, polarize people, rather than things that make people come together. I think it's the time for us now to change that attitude. I mean, if you have a problem, if you have, problem in your life, stressful things, the first place to go is the mosque. But sometimes you go to the mosque, you get more stress. It's very unfortunate. We need to change that. We need to change that. And actually what I was trying to say, people talk a lot about maqasid Sharia, but we tend to forget about maqasid Insaniyah, or Insaniyah in Islam, which is the core things that have been taught by Quran and Sunnah. Insaniyah means humanity. And talking about humanity, I'm not trying to promote this guy, but we're talking about humane economics, we're talking about civil society, or Masyarakat Madani, civilized society, or Madani society, and you're talking about religion and culture. You cannot abandon this book, Asian Renaissance, written by Dato'Dr. Whether you like him or not, but he has been talking about this in the 90s. It's very unfortunate nowadays people are talking about religion as if Ganushi was the first starting, was the first person started talking about, Islam and, democracy, and talking about religion and culture. No, Anwar Ibrahim has been saying this in his book, Asian Renaissance, since the 90s. I miss those years where we did not discuss about petty things about Islam. We did not discuss about all these petty fiqhi ikhtilaf, about Wahhabi, non-Wahhabila, about all these non-fruitful things that's not helpful, that are not helpful to our religion. Those days we were talking about elevation of poverty. We're talking about religion and culture. We're talking about interfaith discussion. We're talking about humane economy, which is very Islamic. Okay? So, we need to read his book again. Maybe, I don't know, nothing to do between me and him. This for sure. I don't belong to. Okay. Okay. It's very interesting too. Just now when Dr. Heba was talking about social responsibility and whatnot, it just reminded me of, the idea of common sense. Common sense is very Islamic. Why? Because there's a sound hadith in Musnad al-Imam Ahmad, narrated by Imam Ahmad and categorized by Ahmad Shakir, by Sheikh Shahwahid as Sahih, where I couldn't recall the whole matan in Arabic, but I mean, Kamakal, it sounds like ما من خير ما قلته أو لم أقله فهو مني. Translated, if there is any goodness, whether I have said it or have not saying it, it's from me. Rasulullah was trying, Prophet Muhammad was trying to assure you, if there are any good things, any goodness, whether you could find it in the Quran, in the prophetic tradition, or you couldn't find it, but it could be accepted. It is universally accepted. It's a universal value, universal good, common good, and it's from me. Rasulullah trying to teach us an epistemic philosophical issue, which anything good that akal could accept, and it's not contradicting with Quran and with prophetic tradition, it is Islamic. So I don't need to ask this question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Maszlee, Dr. Heba, Dr. Dzulkefly, and Dr. Farouk. I think Dr. Maszlee struck a very good point at the end that when it comes to Islam, everything is going on more, and also the main point, I think, which we should be able to get is that civil and being Islamic is a function of safety, of security, of beauty, of peace, and this is something which we in a way should highlight more when we talk about Islam as a religion and society. So I'll end our discussion here today, and once again I think I should call for an applause for all our speakers. Thanks a lot for those who contributed as well with questions and comments.
I've sat that long for anyone, so thank you very much for sitting that long.
Yeah, and also patience. That is also part of being Islamic in Singapore, right? Okay, I end here. Thanks, and remember, just as a reminder, for tomorrow we're going to have another session, also featuring Dr. Heba. This session will be a lot more controversial, maybe. We're going to touch a bit on secularism. That's something more or less on the theme of the topic. And we do welcome you all to come here. Thank you, and see you all tomorrow. So,